find other great podcasts like this one at podmoth.network.
Hey bony friends, future Sophie here, just checking in to say, hey, how are you? And to let you know that this episode will actually be a two-parter. We've got our wonderful friend Darrin on for this spooky episode, and we'll have part 2 where Katelyn talks about one of Seattle's most infamous serial killers. Out for you next week. Enjoy. Darrin, welcome to the show. Welcome to the cold open.
Thanks for having me back. I know it's been a long time.
It's been like a year.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I think it's been like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Do you remember what you talked about the first time?
The first time. Also, is this podcast? Are we in it now? We're just gabbing. We're cold open. Okay.
We're just cold open. We're just gabbing.
Let's see. The first time I talked about the cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov.
Oh, the BFFs.
And then I talked about. Then we did a bonanza, and I talked about you and I both talked about the body who was like used as a carnival attraction.
Oh my God, yes. That might be one of my absolute favorite stories of a guy who was cleaning, I think, an old dark ride.
They were filming a TV show in a dark ride and like knocked the arm off one of what they thought were dummies hanging from a noose, and then it was like, oh, this is a real guy.
And wasn't he like an outlaw or something?
Yeah, he was like a cowboy.
That's so wild, and had just been preserved for like, oh gosh, it would have been like
150 years.
Yeah.
Maybe not 100, maybe like 60 years, but
I was trying to figure out if it was going to be like 100 or like 80. I was like, how?
I think maybe close to 100. I think that's kind of, it was probably like late 1800s, and then like the 1970s they figured it out. I also talked about the poison clown.
Yeah, I think that bonanza was vaguely like amusement park themed or just like, yeah, I think I talked about some Disney stuff.
Yeah, I talked about Walt Disney's Frozen Head.
Sure. And then we had you on with Nick.
Yeah, and we did the 2-part end of year spectacular where where we ranked and picked the best state fossil, which was of course the giant beaver.
We've had some fun ones. I have completely forgot about that.
This is all to say, if you're a new listener, go back and listen to some old episodes. There's some little treats in there.
There's some real bangers, and especially earmarked ones that include Darrin.
Thank you.
In olden days, a glimpse of femur was only for morbid dreamers, but you're not alone. Bring anything bones. Two goofy gals with deathly interest go on a skeleton inquest in your headphones. Anything bones.
Hello and welcome to Anything Bones. I'm Sophie, Beheaded Schwartz.
And I am Katelyn, Hungry Heart. This is the I just thought of that on the fly. Can you believe that? And this is the podcast where we talk about bones, bone-related topics, and really anything that we want. And we've got a guest today, and he's back for the 4th time, I think we just decided.
Sounds right.
Darrin Schultz, everybody.
Let's go!
Woo! Yes.
It might be so loud. I'm sorry if it's really loud.
No, that's okay. It won't be able to be heard over the thunderous applause.
Yeah, add that in post.
Yes. Well, thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here.
The internet is Darrin's domain, after all.
Well, Darrin lives inside of everyone's earpods, respectively.
Yeah,
So
and you need to clean those out. They are waxy.
Ooh.
disgusting.
Anyway.
Yeah, we are on the cusp, if not beginning, of spooky season proper. So we're going to be bringing on some spooky friends and family to add a little bit of Halloween flair to the podcast. And we've got with us a scholar and friend and spooky boy.
I'll take it.
Darrin Schultz. What is your favorite part of the spooky season?
I like how you have to acknowledge that the season is changing. You know, when you get around this time of year, it's like you can't. It's like all summer, it's like kind of the same, which is nice. But then it's like, oh man, it's just colder out now. Like it's just colder, and the leaves are dying, and the sun is not as visible. So it's I think just kind of this like descent into the dark times, and along with that is some scary stuff.
Yes, I love that. And my second question in this just brief little spooky interview that I'm doing, if you're are you 30? Yes, you're a 30-year-old man.
That's true.
If you had to trick or treat as an adult, how would you disguise that fact about yourself?
Oh, that's such a good question. Not what would I dress up as, but how would I hide that I'm 30?
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have to choose a costume that you would expect someone to have to wear stilts for, and then I wouldn't.
Okay.
So, like,
giraffe?
yeah, like a giraffe, that's really good. Or like a Jack Skellington, right? Like,
This is the same question goes to Katelyn. You're a 32-year-old woman. How would you disguise that fact in order to trick or treat?
I would go super old with it.
Ooh.
I would go old lady, but like so hunched over, so cuz I'm pretty tall, so I'd want to disguise that with a hunch.
But you've always been tall.
This is true, but this is how I'm disguising who I really am.
Yes.
So and I'd either go full old age makeup or like face mask. Maybe pretend to have a cough and have like a surgical mask over the whole thing just to really hide your face.
the nice thing now is you don't even need to pretend to have a cough. You could just wear a mask.
You could just be
You
COVID
can.
conscious. Yes.
Yeah.
I think people would prefer if you didn't have a cough.
Yes.
That's true.
Sophie, I have to know,
Yes.
what would you disguise yourself as to not appear to be whatever age it is you are, which is
301.
312.
I recently was the only one out of a table of like 7 or 8 people to be carded at Buca de Beppo.
was there. That was ridiculous.
Yeah, so a bitch would not wear any like eye makeup or anything like that. I would go full dress like a high schooler and try to pull it off. I would maybe, barring that, sheet ghost.
Sheet ghost.
Classic sheet ghost. Classic sheet
and no
ghost.
Platform shoes.
And no
I'm guessing.
platform shoes. Flat-footed. 5'2", living realness. Raw in the flat-footed zone.
Raw dog in the ground.
Raw dog in the ground to trick-or-treat, steal that candy. Take it.
The nice thing about no platforms is you could also run fast like a kid, too.
Oh, yeah, that's true. And especially if I were to be found out in any way, because every person who's giving out candy does reserve the right to rip off your sheet ghost costume and accuse you of being an adult. So
Jacuzzi.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Every
It's
adult
the third secret option.
trick or treat or jacuzzi. Treat or jacuzzi. If you've listened to any of our old episodes about Halloween history, you'll remember that episode about how Halloween is based in murder mysteries and that you have reserved the right to unmask anyone you please on that day.
Yeah.
So yes, I would have to be able to run really fast because if I was jacuzzied, they would be right.
Yeah.
They would be right
You'd have
to
no
do
choice.
that. Yes.
Yeah.
I would have to throw my bag of candy into the air as it scatters down around me, and me and my dogs and Joe running like mad people away from the house as to not be arrested by the candy police.
And they're out every Halloween.
I hate those guys.
They absolutely are. You can recognize them by their red and white striped uniforms and the giant candy canes they use as batons.
Yeah, weirdly they're dressed as candy canes, but it's Halloween. It's confusing.
Well, they're all Christmas people, so
Yeah.
that's why they're willing to
Yeah.
work on Halloween.
They're the Christmas cops, too, so they only wanted to buy one extra uniform.
Mhm.
Okay. So they work 2 days out of the year. That's not bad.
Christ's soldiers for the war on Christmas. And we thank them for it.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for beating people with your candy nightsticks. So with that,
Moving on.
moving on, I thought I would get us started with this spooky episode.
Please.
Oh, yeah.
I am taking the spookiness very seriously and trying to do something chilling for every episode this spooky season. Yes, Darren's shivered already. And this one comes from Joe's research, actually. He in his toodlings around on the internet, he will send me really good topics that he finds. And this one I have actually been saving for the Halloween season for some time.
Hell yeah.
And we're going to be talking about the Nahanni Valley in Canada, otherwise known as the Headless Valley.
Whoa.
Yeah, it is a very spooky name. I'll get my sources done right off the top, and then we will dive into this valley. So we have Wikipedia twice, Ancient Origins, MSN.com, dehacho.org, which is the webpage for some of Canada's Indigenous peoples, and uphere.ca, which I think is a Canadian magazine.
Up here?
Up here? Well, I mean, the here is probably Canada. So to us, it's up there. Katelyn doesn't love that joke.
I mean, from Alaska, it's over there.
That's true. So in true crime, there's a lot of cases that center around the wilderness and disappearances in national parks and things like that. So this is kind of within that vein. I always find those to be one of the creepiest things to me is if you're out in the middle of nowhere and there seems to be no one around you, but there also could be anyone around you.
Yeah, I'm not a big camper, and this is a big part of why. Like, you're just so far away from everything. Like, some people find peace in that, and I feel the opposite. I like to be by certain amenities, like a fire station, police station.
Darrin, you have an intimate relationship with the wilderness, but it's not necessarily the forest so much as it is the ocean.
I like a forest. I'll spend time in a forest. But yeah, I've been... the nice thing about being out on the ocean is you can see all directions.
That would also kind of freak me out, though, if you can see nothing in any of those directions.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've not spent a ton of time, like, out of view of land, which helps a lot. That is an enormous mug, Sophie.
This is Joe's mug.
That mug is, like, as big as your head.
It is a big Lebowski mug, so that makes sense that it's enormous.
Sorry, I just had to say something.
You could have a cup of soup out of that.
You have a bowl of soup out of that.
Honestly, this is one of my smaller mugs.
Sophie loves a big mug. We know this.
Yeah, that's a longtime trait of mine. But I open up this conversation only to say that the Nahanni Valley is one of these deeply, quote unquote, unexplored places in the world. Of course, the Dene people, the indigenous people of the area, have been living there for thousands and thousands of years. But there are places in this valley they do not go.
And, we should respect that.
We should respect that. Everyone should respect that. But all this to say, the Nahanni Valley is in the most, unexplored, inaccessible parts of the Northwest Territories of Canada. And it's about 300 miles from the nearest city, which is a city called Yellowknife.
Oh, yeah.
So you're out there with no resources but whatever you bring and whatever nature can provide for you. The valley is above the 60th parallel north, which puts it in the least settled parts of Canada. And there are, like I said, incredible perils to exploring this territory. Not only are you facing some of the most extreme weather in the world, but there are also a lot of predators up there. We got grizzly bears. We got fucking mountain lions. And, if the elements don't get you, perhaps your own stupidity will.
Yeah.
It is also one of the most visually stunning places in the world. We're talking untouched Canadian wilderness, rich green trees, and stunning mountains that seem to go up, for forever into the sky. And because of its beauty, it was actually named an UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1978. But it's funny because a lot of places, when they get named a heritage site, they will get more visitors, you know? Not for the Nahanni Valley.
It's kind of the Streisand effect, but yeah, not here.
Too hard to get there. But as I said, you know, between the grizzly bears and the timber wolves, it's not the most welcoming place. But like we talked about before, the Dene people, or also sometimes called the Slave peoples, have been living here for as far back as 10,000 years, which is incredible. So first contact with like European fur traders was in the 18th century. And this was increased by a guy named Alexander Mackenzie. And he was exploring what they call the Mackenzie River, or also Den Cho River.
I wonder what they call it that.
Was it the white man who said he found it?
Yeah, the guy who named it after himself.
I mean, I feel like you could name the river so much better things. But, you know, it's a tradition to name it after yourself.
Oh, yeah.
We see it time and time again. He's like, oh, this river's beautiful. I think I'm the only one that's ever seen this river.
No one's ever seen this river ever in your life. He turns around, the Dene people are just like, hi.
Yeah. He's like, have you seen this?
They're like, yeah, we're here. And actually, I would love to throw in an amazing, like, fun fact about the Dene and their, like, relationship with traders. They would continue to live. They were, like, nomadic people, but then they started to set up settlements as soon as, like, trading posts and stuff started coming in. And it was really cool because they usually, like, made their homes in the mountains, but sometimes they would make these boats made out of, like, 6 to 10 moose hides. And they would make these moose hide boats, and they would go down the river to trade with just them, the stuff that they were going to trade, and their doggies. And they would go to the trading post, disassemble their boat, trade everything that made the boat, and then them and their doggies just trekked back.
Just walked back.
Damn. How cool is that? I just thought that was amazing.
That's so efficient.
Right?
Very resourceful.
You're like, I don't need to pack what I'm trading. I'm riding it there. That's so cool to me. It's like so efficient. Like I have a secret love of efficiency, like taking like the most efficient like route somewhere, or like packing a bag the most efficiently it can be packed to save the most space.
Yeah.
And so that really tickled something in me where I was like, yes, I love that.
It's like a bread bowl.
It is. It is the bread bowl of boats. You don't need a bowl because you eat the bowl. You don't need a boat because you trade the boat. I love it. So all this to say, the Dene used the river for all parts of their lives, but they didn't live right by the river. That territory was reserved for the Naha people.
Sorry, Sophie, can I just say they didn't live down by the river?
Down by the river.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, of course. Shout out to our Baldur's Gate 3 fans in the crowd. They stayed away from living or camping by the river because that was the territory of the Naha people. And the Naha people were said to be a tribe that lived by the river and sometimes up in the mountains, but they would sometimes come down from the mountains and do raids on the Dene people and other settlements in the area and violently assert their dominance of their territory. And the valley itself is even actually named for them. The Nahanni Valley actually means the river of the land of the Naha people. So pretty explicit.
Yep,
Claimed it.
Sense.
Yeah, and no one's like fighting them for that. They're like, Naha, you got it.
Well, I can think of a Mr. Mackenzie who might have something to say.
Oh, I would love to see them go head to head. Ooh, I mean, as we'll find out, off with his head.
Oh, right, the Valley of the Headless.
But one thing about the Naha is that they were said to have kind of appeared very quickly and then disappeared very quickly. And by disappeared very quickly, I mean like disappeared as in they didn't see people from this tribe after a certain time, like ever. So we're not quite sure actually what happened to them.
It's another Croatoa situation.
Just thinking that.
They either died out from disease, left to live somewhere else, which seems unlikely because the valley's fucking named for them, or they dispersed to be other groups of people. We're not quite sure. But this valley, the Naha Valley, was their territory, and there's actually a place within the valley called the 200-Mile Gorge, which is a place that the Dene feel is like evil. There's a bad vibe there, and they don't go there.
You know it when you feel it.
You know it when you feel it, yes. And that kind of gorge is sort of the focus of these headless tales that I'll be getting into here in a second. Because things really get interesting for the Naha Valley when the Klondike Gold Rush kicks off. And I don't know if listeners are familiar with the California Gold Rush, which happened in 1849, hence the 49ers. But whenever gold is found in North America somewhere, usually in the 1800s, word spreads like wildfire, and everybody's fucking husband and brother and son want to get their asses up there to get some motherfucking gold. And the Klondike Gold Rush was said to have drawn almost 100,000 prospectors to the Klondike region of the Yukon, which is in northwest Canada. And this was between 1896 and 1899. And when gold was discovered, it was a big deal for people in San Francisco and Seattle, which is where many of the prospectors came from. Yes.
That's where Seattle got the nickname Gateway to the North.
Aha!
It was from the Gold Rush.
So as you would probably expect, many 99.9% of people going up to find gold did not find it. Ended up going up to the Yukon, fucking around, and many of them met misfortune trying to strike it rich. But the Naha Valley was not excluded from this influx of prospectors. Two of the most famous prospectors to come through this valley were two brothers named Willie and Frank McLeod. And in 1906, they had a boat and went upriver to reach the Naha Valley. And this was the last time they had any communication with the outside world, because the next time anyone saw them was in 1908 when a search party found their skeletons and the remains of their camp. They seemed to be asleep when they were attacked, and the body of one brother was reaching out towards his gun. And the thing that really would stick out to you about these skeletons is that they didn't have any heads.
Oh, boy.
Here we go.
Did they find the heads, or was it just, like, the bodies without the heads?
Bodies, no heads.
Bodies, no heads.
So they were either taken by the, like, killers, or some very, very weird raccoons.
A wolverine.
Took just the head off? Yeah, took just the head and nothing else.
It's strange that they were both, like, if just one of them was headless after so long, I would point to scavengers, but they're both headless. Like, it's really weird.
Purposeful.
Yeah. And so this sparked rumors through the whole prospecting community in the area. They were like, who could have done this? And they thought perhaps it was the Naha. Because we're white people. Yeah.
We want to blame the people of color nearby.
And sorry, remind me, at this point, have the Naha disappeared?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
So, or they haven't been seen in a very long time. But rumors swirled that they had found gold and that they had told somebody. And that they had a mine somewhere where they had found gold. So that triggered even more people coming into this extremely dangerous valley which of course, the temperatures are below freezing. We've got high winds. We've got an extremely dangerous and treacherous river. And all these people are like, I think I'll go find myself some gold. 2 guys have been found headless, so that means it's my time to shine.
Won't happen to me. I'm different.
Exactly. But indeed, they were not so different.
Uh-oh.
There were theories and rumors swirling around that more and more deceased people were popping up in this area, particularly headless. There was a corpse of a man, a Swiss prospector named Martin Jorgensen. He too was decapitated next to the remains of his cabin. His cabin had been burnt to the ground. So he's decapitated and his cabin is burnt to the ground. This is not a death by the elements.
Definitely not.
Again, rumors swirled that this was either the Naha or competitors to some gold that he had found. Everybody, right before their death, finds gold in these rumors.
And he hid it again so that nobody would find it. Now it's a treasure hunt.
Yeah, Katelyn.
Oh.
Yeah. That's basically like both of these stories, both with the McLeods and with this guy, that they had found treasure that somewhere they had struck it rich, told somebody, and that somebody had come back for them.
This is the worst game of telephone.
Exactly. So by this time, this valley is starting to get a reputation for itself. We've had a decade of mysterious deaths in this valley. So people start calling it Dead Man's Valley, Headless Creek, Headless Range, Funeral Range, and the Headless Man's Valley.
No Sleepy Hollow in there, huh?
Ichabod Crane's Headless Valley for silly boys. As we continue through the gold rush and into the 1920s, in 1927, another body is discovered in the Nahanni, and it belongs to a man nicknamed Yukon Fisher.
Yukon Fisher?
I know, not Yukon Fisher.
Ugh.
Not town legend.
Did he strike it rich?
Yes, he did. The thing about him was that he was actually wanted by the Canadian Mounted Police. So he was actually actively being looked for. But he was like, fuck that shit. I'm going to go out and find me some gold.
You know where they'll never find me? The Headless Valley.
The Headless Valley where everyone dies. I'll go there and that's where I'll be safe.
Couldn't happen to me. I'm different.
I'm different. He was different, actually, in a way that he was known to have paid for some of his mining supplies with gold nuggets. And that is different. Because a lot of people say they struck gold, but they don't have a lot to back it up. But if you're paying for shit in gold nuggets, that's kind of interesting.
You might have found something.
Show me the gold, you know?
Show me the gold, show me the money. But unfortunately, in 1927, his body was discovered by the Canadian Royal Mounted Police on the banks of Bennett Creek, which is very close to where the bodies of the McLeod brothers, our first beheaded duo, were found in 1908. No one is really quite sure how he died. He was not noted to be headless. And I'm not sure if they, in 1927 in the Yukon, did an autopsy on him.
Probably not a very good one.
Probably not a very good one. They looked at him, they said, bopped on the head. Bopped on the noggin.
It's a long way to take someone for a slab, you know?
It's true. Moving forward again, in 1931, we have another very interesting case that might sound a little familiar. There was a man named Phil Powers, and his body was discovered in the charred remains of his cabin.
No.
We have another burned down cabin.
And his cabin is in the valley, the Headless Valley?
Yes.
Oh.
And where's his head?
I don't know if he was headless. I don't think that he was. I think he was just burned to death in his cabin.
So kind of irrelevant.
Kind of irrelevant, but creepy nonetheless.
Oh, yeah.
From the 1920s until the 1940s, people keep coming to this valley for either gold mining expeditions or hunting expeditions. And there are many stories of people getting lost in that way. But I would just attribute that a lot to like wilderness naivete and how intensely difficult the terrain is out there. But I did want to talk about a woman whose name was Annie Lefrette. And she went missing in the Nahanni Valley in 1926. And she was with a hunting party. And she was said to have just wandered off. And then she was never confirmed to be seen again. But there was a hiker a few years later who reported seeing a white woman wandering around in the Nahanni Valley naked, trying to climb up the face of a rock, talking nonsense.
Hello? What?
I hate that.
Right? That gave me the shivers.
Yeah, me too.
And again, the vibe of this valley is bad.
Yeah.
Everyone who goes there says that it is bad. There was a man in 1947, author Pierre Burton, who was sent by the Vancouver Sun to write a story about just the beautiful north of Canada. He wrote this quote in his article, quote, Frank Henderson himself, a man who perhaps has good reason not to want many people rushing into the valley, was quoted as saying on his return from the area last fall, quote, there's absolutely no denying the sinister atmosphere of that whole valley. The weird, continual wailing of the wind is something I won't soon forget.
Creepy.
Ugh.
So what he's talking about is the fact that because of the shape of the valley, the sound of the wind there is unsettling.
Just screaming.
Yeah. Like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeesh.
It's not a good impression of it. But the disappearances are not all that is creepy about the Nahanni. There are also 250 plus underground caverns.
No.
Yes. What could be in there?
Not good stuff.
Not good stuff. These caverns were mostly found by a guy named Jean Poriel, who was from Montreal. And he discovered and mapped these caverns. And the one that caught my attention the most was one called the Valerie Cavern, which he named for his daughter.
Okay.
Which was filled with 116 sheep skeletons.
What made that cave its lair? It was probably a wild animal, but that's creepy.
It's creepy.
That's creepy. I don't like that.
But he named it for his daughter. Isn't that sweet?
Yeah. When I think of my daughter, I want to think of 116 sheep skeletons.
It's funny because Joe actually asked me a similar question because he had brought this topic to me. And this was one of the first things that he told me was that there was a cavern full of 116 sheep skeletons. Yeah. And I said, sir, that's bones. That's absolutely bones, my love.
You know what's really scary is how many times whoever counted those skeletons fell asleep.
Aww. He's so sleepy. Wake up in the cave. The ghost goes, excuse me, you're not done. Why does he keep falling asleep?
He's counting the sheep.
He had to keep starting over.
Yes, exactly. It took him so long. But Joe was like, this is so wild that he named it after his daughter. Like, if your dad found 116 sheep skeletons in a cave and named it after you, what would you think? I was like, I would think that was awesome. He was like, you were the wrong person to ask this of.
Most people would probably say, no, thank you.
Yes. I could go on about this valley and its various disappearances and natural phenomena for a whole episode in and of itself. But in summation, there is about up to 44 persons who have either died or disappeared in this valley from 1908 to the present.
And that's just current.
Yes, that's just modern and recorded disappearances and deaths.
Ooh.
Yeesh.
A lot of these disappearances, I would say, are due to nature ineptitude. But what I find a lot more interesting are the beheadings, the random cabin burn downs with the people inside, and the sheep skeletons, and the woman gone mad in the woods.
Yeah. There's something about what I would call hill people that really scares me.
Yes.
And I'd say that's hill people. That's the hill people business.
Yes. And there's a lot of kind of ugly folklore around calling the Naha violent and responsible for this. Some articles go as far as to call them cannibalistic, which we don't really have any evidence for. Yes, woof indeed. But it reminds me a lot of, like, have you guys ever seen the movie Bone Tomahawk?
No, but I've been meaning to.
It has a similar vibe of, like, there's a tribe of people that the indigenous people of the area are like, no, we don't even fuck with them. Like, we don't fuck with them. Nobody fucks with them. They're the worst. And a group of white people have to endeavor to get back some people who were kidnapped by the tribe that nobody fucks with. They have to fuck with them. So that reminded me a lot of this, but there is no, other than rumors and conspiracies, which are abound, this is a big talking point for Hollow Earth people, if you know them.
Oh, because the caverns?
Yes. There are a sect of people who believe that the Earth is hollow, that it doesn't have like a core or mantle or any of that fun shit science has proved. That the Earth is hollow, and within that hollow Earth is like a prehistoric like civilization like going on in there. That's a whole other thing, Hollow Earth is. But they believe that these caverns are entrances to the Hollow Earth, and that people who disappear there are going to the Hollow Earth. But I would say that's a big no-no. I believe the ghosts are beheading people before the Hollow Earth.
Yeah.
Me too.
And why would you just let your head go down to the Hollow Earth? Not take a whole thing,
Just rolling down. I'm going to roll my head down to the Hollow Earth. See what's up down there.
Roll your head on down to the Hollow Earth.
Roll your head on down to the Hollow Earth. We got dinosaurs. We got palm fronds. No lava, though. No lava.
No lava. No molten iron.
No magnetic core.
No gold.
No gold. No gold.
No magma.
No magma. I think at the end of the day, there is a lot of truth to these rumors of people being murdered for their gold. That's where I would put my money.
Sure.
But I do think that there are natural places that have a naturally sinister presence. The fact that the Dene people, the other longer lasting indigenous group, won't go there, I think says something.
Yeah.
I think we should have just listened to that from the beginning. Like, okay, let's not go there either.
Yeah.
Exactly. And as far as all these like Naha rumors go, the Naha disappeared completely. And that's what like both oral stories and sociocultural markers tell us. Because there is some speculation that the Navajo that are from southwestern United States are actually descendants of the Naha because their languages are very similar. So a lot of people believe the Naha split up and migrated to different places so they wouldn't be around to behead and burn people's cabins down.
Yeah, they just wouldn't be there. Good alibi.
They just wouldn't be there. Yeah, exactly. It all remains a mystery. It's such a remote place that it is almost a world of its own with rules of its own. I think the moral of this is to respect that because something in that valley is watching out for it.
Yeah. Yeesh.
Fully shivered.
Fully shivered. I was in Alaska recently and with some of our friends who had never been before. And I kind of came on this phrase, which I sort of kept using as a sort of like, how do Alaskans feel about like the dangers of living there, Mm-hmm. And it just came down to have fun but don't be stupid.
Exactly.
And it's kind of what I was thinking about with like, you can go out and look for your gold, but like maybe don't go to the place where people keep getting beheaded and burned down.
Right? The repeated cabins getting burned down with the people inside them is freaky to me.
Yeah, that means it really wasn't an animal in any way.
Yeah, because even two beheaded people I could maybe be convinced is scavengers, but...
It could be a bear.
I haven't seen a bear light a house on fire in a long time.
Famously, bears hate fire.
Smokey is very against it.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Well, that is my, albeit brief, report on the bone-chilling Nahanni Valley.
I'm chilled. I'm bone chilled.
He's fully shivered.
Fully shivered. I'm going to be thinking about that one. I'm going to be stinking on that one for a while.
As Katelyn would say.
I think the thing I say the most that has come from this podcast is I'm going to be stinking on that for a while.
It never leaves your nose.
A scary story never leaves the brain of your nose. Yes. Oh my goodness.
Man. I have goosebumps on the back of my neck. I don't know.
There's a naked woman climbing up the mountain behind you.
God damn it!
Get out of here,
She's
lady.
scaling the walls of the condo!
Lady, this isn't Canada. Get out of here.
Part of me just wonders if it was like a mountain goat with mange. And the babbling was just it going up. Just the way goats make noise.
See, I tend to believe that it was a woman just grown mad by running around this valley and was just trying to get out and had kind of lost her mind.
It creeps me out so much to think about, like, I don't know, something or someone, like, creeping around in the night, like, watching people in their, like, camps and just, like, going over and just setting their houses on fire or, like, chopping their heads off in their sleep, because that's the first two. Looked like they were killed in their sleep.
But then why take the heads? Also, I'm sure the details aren't there because this happened 100 years ago, but I was thinking, like, was it clear that, like, especially, and also they found the bodies, like, you know, a while after because they were skeletons, like you were saying, but, like, you know, if that had happened, if we had found them now, we could have done some forensics and been like, oh, there's blood everywhere because they cut the heads off right before right after they died, or they killed them by cutting. You can usually tell that stuff by how much, you know, blood loss there is.
Oh, so, yeah. Plus, like, the wounds and stuff. Yeah. Oh, there are so many cases where I wish that we could go back in time and do an autopsy. I was editing our last week's episode with the disappearance of, what was the guy's name again, Katelyn?
Tim Molnar.
Oh, that story is upsetting. But he, for listeners and Darrin, he went missing from Florida and was found dead in Wisconsin.
What?
Yeah, with like almost no information in between. He ditched his car in Georgia. That's all we really know.
And he was found like in the remote woods in Wisconsin.
That's so weird.
With the same clothes he had on when he disappeared. So
I just read a Stephen King book that was kind of like that. That was, I think, based on a true thing, but I couldn't tell you exactly. It's a novel, so it's, you know, not like, but that was sort of it was called The Colorado Kid, and that was sort of the crux of it. Was like a guy is found dead on a beach in remote Maine, and only through using like seeing a stamp on the bottom of the cigarette box he had did they determine that he had come from Colorado that morning.
Weird.
Somehow, like, I mean, it's like it's a novel, but yeah, it's like weird, like. How do you, just the logistics of, like, how did this person get here can be so baffling. And then you have to be like, oh, yeah, and they died in a mysterious way, too.
Yeah. Why?
Right? And so I was like, oh, so yearning for the ability to do a modern autopsy on him. And part of me was like, oh, he was definitely killed in Florida and just driven up to Wisconsin.
Interesting.
I don't know. This year's slate of bone topics is very mystery heavy, and I'm loving it.
Time for an ad break, you wild people.
Hello, Hauntlings. My name is Alyssa.
And I'm Lindsay.
We're Macabre at Midnight, minus the RE.
Join us every week as we discuss and rate anything that fits on our scale of screams.
We like to talk about creepy things, and we want to share them with you. Sometimes it's the paranormal.
Like ghosts or aliens or a cryptid or two.
Sometimes it's just a twisted turn in history. True crime, fact or fiction, the works.
Nope, don't like that.
So if you're a prideful weirdo like us, and you're interested in things that tend to be a little macabre,
this time with the RE,
then check us out wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we will see you in
your nightmares.
Well, should we change gears?
Okay.
To whatever Darrin has prepared for us?
All right.
Yes,
Are you
please.
ready?
Yes, please.
He's stretching in anticipation.
He's stretching. I feel as though I must stretch as well.
Yeah, let's all do a quick stretch.
Yeah, if you want to get up and maybe do a toe touch, stretch out those arms, do a big up in the air.
Not if you're driving, though.
Not if you're driving.
But if you're at a stoplight, maybe just do some like neck rolls.
Yeah. Get out some of that tension. Unclench your jaw. I know your jaw is clenched right now.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so let's see where to start. I will start by saying there was 2 things in your story, Sophie, that are relevant to my story, which I thought was interesting.
Hell yeah.
Kind of tangentially, but just little. It was like, oh, that's like something I'm going to mention.
Ooh.
I'm going to start with a content warning for child death and the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is just mostly the content I'm talking about. So I'll just launch into it. This kind of came together because I've been thinking a lot about like storytelling through different mediums lately, especially like movies. I've been trying to watch a lot of movies lately. It's spooky season, so of course spooky movies are on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Sophie and I were talking about this last night.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been thinking about like what, are sort of the shorthands that are used to sort of get a point across. Because there's a lot of, you think about like the Wilhelm scream, right? That's used in so many movies where it's like, oh, that's sort of an audio engineer Easter egg to be like, hey, we all use this same scream that's been used in movies for like almost 100 years. Or if you've ever seen a baby carriage like rolling down a flight of stairs, that's been used in a bunch of movies because that's sort of a like an immediate danger that you have to go, whatever you're doing, you have to go stop the baby carriage from falling down the stairs.
Yes, or you're or it's shorthand for you're a terrible person.
Yeah, it's like a very easy moral dilemma. It's sort of like a trolley problem for whatever character you're focusing on, where it's like no matter what they're doing, whatever shenanigans are up to, you can't just let the baby carriage roll down the stairs.
I try not to when I see it in my day-to-day. Sometimes I'm like, well, I'm on the way to the bank. They're going to close in 10 minutes. I'm sorry, baby.
You'd think they'd finally put brakes on those strollers, but no.
No, every 10 minutes I feel like when I'm out, I see a vintage baby carriage trundling down a set of extremely steep stairs.
So these are very Western film concepts. And what I noticed, or what this story about is specifically, is something like this that I noticed in a non-Western film, that film being Godzilla -1.
I love this movie.
Katelyn, have you seen this movie?
Godzilla
-1?
Not yet.
Okay.
I've been wanting to, though.
Oh,
okay, well,
it's so good.
You should watch it, and I don't think this will make you want to watch it any less. Hopefully it'll make you want to watch it more, if
Probably.
anything. So Godzilla -1 is a film that came out last year, 2023. It was produced in Japan. It is the first Japanese Godzilla film to be made in a while. Like, less than 10 years, like since 2016, I think, with Shin Godzilla, which is actually, we'll get to that. But Godzilla was originally created in 1954 for the film Godzilla. It's a giant prehistoric lizard, but the narrative being that the lizard already existed, and then due to atomic bomb testing done by the United States government, Godzilla gets bigger and gets radioactive.
Oh, Godzilla.
Right, and comes out of the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Comes out of the ocean and destroys a Japanese city.
Mm-hmm.
And the sort of obvious, this has been discussed not to death, but this has been discussed widely as like Godzilla is a metaphor for nuclear warfare and for the destruction to Japan caused by the United States military during World War II.
Yes.
Godzilla is this unstoppable force, literally causing like radioactive damage, usually set like post-war Japan, but still like, Japan was already like severely firebombed prior to the dropping of the atomic bombs. So not in a good place.
Already, yeah.
So prior to seeing Godzilla -1, I've seen all of the what's called the MonsterVerse movies that were released. There's been one since called Godzilla X Kong New Empire. It sucks. I'm not going to talk about that movie at all. But you know what is heavily featured in that movie, Sophie? Hollow Earth.
Really? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Those movies are all about Hollow Earth now. It's weird.
Can I just quickly ask, who wins? Yeah. Does Godzilla win or does King Kong win?
So a few years ago, they had Godzilla versus Kong, and Godzilla won, definitely.
Okay, cool.
But then they had to team up to fight Mechagodzilla.
What the what?
And so then it became, they had a sort of a King Kong got to live in the Hollow Earth and be the guardian of the Hollow Earth, and Godzilla gets to live above the Hollow Earth and be the guardian of above Earth. Upper Earth.
Okay, everybody wins.
And then in Godzilla X Kong New Empire, they have to team up again to fight an evil King Kong who lives in the Hollow Earth and looks more like an orangutan. He's called the Scar King.
Obviously.
Yeah. How do they communicate?
They just vibes. They just vibe.
They're like two besties who meet and can't speak the same language, but they love to hang out.
Well, this is kind of what I want to get to, which is in Godzilla and Godzilla -1. Godzilla's just like a force of nature, like just unstoppable. All the people can do is cower and then try to come up with a plan to stop him in case he comes back. In these US-produced Godzilla movies, Godzilla, how did I put this? The origin is kind of the same. Like Godzilla exists, and then we drop a bomb on him in the 50s, and he gets stronger. But for the rest of the movies, he's always, if he's destroying a city, he's fighting another worse monster. So it's like, hey, basically, if we made this guy, he's a good guy, and we're good guys. So like anything he does is justified. You know, real U.S. military propaganda, right?
Okay.
Like, no, Godzilla is good. Like, having a nuclear bomb is a good thing. Whereas in Japan, it's like, this has destroyed our lives.
Yeah, it's -1 definitely has a different tone.
It's a super different tone. But here's the thing. I'm not really talking about Godzilla. That's not really what I'm here to talk about. That's just the context for this story.
I was strapped in to talk about Godzilla.
We can come back and talk about Godzilla. But so in Godzilla -1, there's this small detail after the main Godzilla attack about halfway through the movie. People are sort of clearing out the rubble and dealing with the devastation. And there's a scene where some scientist or someone in a lab coat waves a Geiger counter over a red tricycle that's sticking out of the rubble. And it's like very radioactive. And this tricycle is a direct reference to something called Shin's tricycle.
This sounds sad.
Yes.
Oh yeah, this is where it gets sad. So I'm going to send you both a link right now so you can see a picture of it.
Ooh, that's really creepy.
So this tricycle is in the Hiroshima Memorial Peace Museum and was donated by Nobuo Tetsutani in 1985. Roughly, I think it was 1985. The museum is dedicated to the memory of the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, when at 8:15 a.m., the atomic bomb designated Little Boy was dropped by the Enola Gay. Here's another thing about your story, Sophie. The Enola Gay is named after the pilot's mom.
Weird.
Well, you know, everyone's naming horrific things after their female family members.
Yeah, so Colonel Paul Tibbets named it after his mom, Enola Gay Tibbets. So
if I'm Enola Gay Tibbets, I'm like, can you name maybe a pair of military pants after me? Like something innocuous, not like the plane that delivered
the two nuclear bombs.
A literal death, yeah.
So the first of two bombs dropped on Japan. The second bomb would be dropped on Nagasaki 3 days later. So the bomb resulted in an estimated 70,000 deaths by detonation and then another 75,000 by the end of the year, with thousands more affected by wounds and radiation. That's where the, this is all fact part of my story kind of ends, and the rest of my story becomes a little more anecdotal.
Cool.
Not because I think it's a little tricky, and so a lot of my research around this was this is a story that was told with the tricycle being donated to the museum. So it's kind of we're taking this as true because it's part of the narrative, and I don't think the narrative, even if it is quote unquote historically accurate, matters if it is, because it is all extremely plausible and sort of can be pieced together by real things that certainly would have happened, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
sure.
It's true to the emotion and memory, even if it's not literally true.
It's part of the maybe culture or part of folklore, kind of.
Yeah. It's become part of, I would say, the sort of narrative around the bombings.
Okay.
So on August 6th, 1945, Shinichi Tetsutani was 3 years old. He was outside playing with his friend Kimi with his tricycle, which was a pretty rare commodity due to the war and, materials being used for war stuff. There had been an air raid siren earlier that morning, but it had passed, and the all clear was set out, and they were outside playing. And then the bomb was dropped at 8:15. So in the aftermath of the explosion, Shin's parents found him pinned under a beam of their collapsed home, still holding on to the handlebars of his tricycle. And they were able to free him, but he died later that day from his injuries.
Ugh.
And the remains of his 2 sisters were found in their home later. And his friend Kimmy also died.
Jesus.
As well. Yeah. A couple days later, they were all buried in the backyard of the home, with Kimmy's mother requesting that she be buried with him as they were such close friends. This is all coming from a story called Shin's Tricycle, which is a children's book that was published in 1995, based on this story. That's a story, or it's a novel by Tatsuhari Kodama, and this is sort of the publicly known shared version of this story. The whole story is available online. It's only a couple pages, 3 pages long, but it's a more detailed version of what I'm saying right now. So 40 years later, after the city has been rebuilt and revitalized, this is something interesting, but I didn't think about this until until Oppenheimer came out, basically. But Hiroshima and Nagasaki are fine, like radioactive wise, because of the way the bombs were detonated. They caused massive destruction, but essentially all the radioactive isotopes decayed extremely quickly, so there really wasn't that much radiation left over after the bombs, which is just something I thought was interesting. And that changes depending on if a bomb is detonated like in the air or underground or in the ocean. Or
Yeah, that's fascinating.
that's why a dirty bomb is very dangerous, because if a bomb explodes underground, it then irradiates the soil and extends the half-life of the radioactive materials, and that's when it becomes very, very dangerous.
Jesus.
That's why, by comparison, what's it called?
Chernobyl?
Chernobyl. Yeah, Chernobyl is like in such bad shape because like the ground is radioactive there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, just some science stuff.
Interesting.
So 40 years later, Shin's parents decide to exhume the bodies and bury them in a cemetery. And when they do that in 1985, they find the tricycle buried with them. They had kind of forgotten it was there.
Okay.
They bury the tricycle with the bodies, basically. And so Shin's father decides to donate it to the museum to sort of, exist as this symbol of what happens in war. And the sort of quote from the end of the book, the last line of the book is, "Now Shin's story helps keep the dream of peace alive for children around the world."
Ooh.
So I knew about this story prior to seeing Godzilla -1. I had read it at some point somewhere, online. So when I saw the movie and then just clocked that one very short moment where you just see the red tricycle being waved over, it just hit me really hard,
Yeah, that's so fucking sad.
So it's evocative is I guess what I'm trying to say, that even if you don't know the story, you see the movie, you see a radioactive tricycle, you can understand what it's saying. But just by this one detail being put into the movie, it's a Godzilla attack. But because if you know the story of the real in quotes tricycle, it becomes this different thing. It becomes this much heavier, I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before about anti-war sentiment, but
Yeah.
war is bad.
Period.
Yeah.
We're a strong anti-war, anti-genocide, anti-violence podcast.
Yeah. I'm with all of that as well.
Thank you for bringing this. This is, I feel like, so appropriate for our podcast because we talk about the importance of artifacts, and we talk a lot about artifacts like mummies or corpses or things like that. But I think just as important are the artifacts that symbolize the implied death.
Yeah.
Something like this reminds us so strongly that it was all walks of life that were affected and ended by this bomb dropped by the United States.
Yeah, and it was over a city. I think comparatively, the number of deaths of civilians was so much higher.
Yeah.
In the 90th percentile, civilians compared to military deaths. It's terrible. It's terrible. But yeah, also just to get my sources out now, because if I'd said them before, it would have been one of those. You got to say them after. It was the story Shin's Tricycle by Tatsuhari Kodama, a YouTube video by the channel Rare Earth called The Nuclear Tricycle, a CNN article called A Tricycle, a Toddler, and an Atomic Bomb.
Oh.
This story has been... That's what's kind of what I'm saying about, like, every story I read was just a kind of retelling of the children's... of the story. So I couldn't really find any, like, additional sources to support the narrative other than the book that is the narrative.
Yeah.
So, but the story is the story, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I see exactly what you mean of, like, it's emblematic of many smaller stories.
Screen Rant article, Easter eggs in Godzilla -1. This was an interesting article. It was by the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, just called Hiroshima and Nagasaki Bombings. Like, that was just about the bombings, and the Wikipedia page for the Hiroshima bombing. Those are my primary sources.
Yeah, it's just like seeing the image of the tricycle is really haunting. It's like something that should be, fun and playful and like for children, and it's like rotted and rusting, and obviously something like bad happened. And then part of me is thinking like, oh, and it's also technically like a grave good because it was in there, it was buried with them, and all that evokes. So yeah, woo.
I also just want to say, on a lighter note, it was a little hard for me to find any like other research other than just this tricycle is in this movie, because if you Google Godzilla tricycle, it's all just toys of Godzilla riding a tricycle.
Aww. That is funny.
I don't know who needs that, but
it's making me laugh.
Me possibly.
Maybe just do yourself a favor now and Google Godzilla tricycle.
I'm going to.
Yeah, 1 second. Wow, it's like oh my goodness, look at him.
He's having a blast.
Oh my god, there's a poster of Godzilla riding a tricycle while mouth blasting another monster.
Like, I don't think this is an intentional reference at all, I don't think this is like Godzilla with Shin's tricycle action.
No.
Some of these are going on eBay for $250.
Yeah, this was $100.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting about it, too, is that the tricycle was added so much later to the narrative, because he didn't exhume the bodies until Nobuo, until 40 years after. So, as far as, like, post-bombing narratives go, this one was added to the official sort of, museum well after the point that there was a museum, he had a museum to donate it to.
Yeah.
Sure.
So just kind of an interesting, like, retrospective...
Yeah.
We're adding this in.
I think it speaks to also how history is created and retold, by survivors of these events. And I think it takes time after such a chaotic, horrendous event, it takes time to sort out what all happened.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how it's implied, or not implied, but sort of presented in the book, that it's like, they always wanted to have a proper burial for the children, but, it took them 40 years to feel ready for it. But the whole time, but they also say that there was something, again, this is how it's presented in the book, but like something nice about knowing they were always close by, too.
I bet.
By having them buried in the backyard.
Oh, that got me, Darrin.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking about Shin's tricycle.
Yes.
That was fascinating and so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But so important to talk about.
Yeah, just it all seemed like it was made sense. We've been talking about movies a lot. I know you and Joe, of course, have seen the Godzilla film in question.
We have.
And I was like, oh, there's this one little detail in that movie that will break your heart if you know what it's referencing.
Oh.
The thing is, that movie is already crushingly sad so many times that it's like, well, just add in another crying moment.
Well, friends, I think we only have one thing left to tell the people of our bony community. Bone
Voyage. Goodbye.
Bye.
let spooky season begin.
Thanks for listening to Anything Bones. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Anything Bones Podcast, or email us at anythingbonespodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you to Nick Kruger for our spooky music and Stephen Vetteroff
At Chubby Scrubby on Twitter.
for our jazzy vocals, and thank you to Camilla Franklin
At Camilla Strader on Instagram.
for our beautiful bony artwork. Please rate, review, and subscribe.
Let's go, ladies. Let's go, ladies.